Welcome to Rainy Day Rabbit Holes,
a uniquely Pacific Northwest podcast.
I'm Shea.
And I'm Jody.
Let's fall down the rabbit hole. Today, we are going to talk about Shea's trip to Japan. That's me, Shea.
I'm excited to hear about it.
And how Japan has a big part of the history of the Pacific Northwest.
Yes. I remember it as a kid and as an adult hearing various things, not just one or two things, lots of connections with Japan and the Pacific Northwest.
I don't know if I told you I went to Japan.
What? When? I didn't know you wanted to go to Japan.
I know. Did anybody know I was going to Japan? Did I tell anybody? Did I talk about it at all with anybody?
I didn't even know you even tried to speak Japanese.
Well, hi, everybody. I'm Shea.
I'm Jody.
Yes, and this is Rainy Day Rabbit Holes, as we've established. And yeah, I went to Japan for 16 days with my big brother, Jason. Hi, Jason. I miss you, Jason. I miss Japan.
I'll meet you someday, Jason.
Yes. He'll be coming up hopefully this spring or summer. I'm supposed to go there this spring because he lives in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's nicer there in January than it is in Washington State.
100%.
So, but
did you know January is not spring, though?
Oh, it's still winter. That's true. I know. I always, in my mind, winter is December. That's it. And then spring starts on January 1st. No, it's still winter time, Shea.
I find winter so depressing. I need to make it just 1 month. I need that mindset.
I know. I wish that it was just like December 1st happens, snow falls, and there's snow, not on the streets the whole month, but like everywhere else, and it's beautiful, and it stays white instead of brown. And then come January 1st, it melts. I don't know.
Yeah. That's like magical land.
Exactly. That's what it is in my mind. But I also grew up in Arizona, so I do remember one time in Tucson that it did snow on Christmas.
Wow.
Yeah,
Tucson.
which was magical. And of course it doesn't stick, but just having it snow in Tucson at all was pretty amazing. I doubt that's ever going to happen again.
Well, I mean, it's pretty rare here too. Very rare here.
Well, I mean, we get snow a couple of times.
Yeah,
during the winter.
Let's see. I remember one day, maybe twice, that it's actually snowed while I was here. 1 year, I went to Montana as an adult for Christmas to see my grandparents, and it snowed here on Christmas. Now there, it was a blizzard, and we got stuck a couple extra days.
Oh God, yeah. I've never been to Montana.
What?
No.
Oh my goodness.
I know. We need to do a road trip. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I've been meaning to go for years.
Multiple places that we need to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. So went to Japan with my big brother, and I wanted to tell everybody about it, and then I'll shut up about Japan for a while.
You're not allowed to talk about it one more time.
Exactly. Last night at my friend Shea's 30th birthday party, she's like, oh, my friend over here who I'm so sorry, I can't remember their name, but she's like, they just got back from Japan too. And I was like, oh my God, let's go talk about Japan. So we talked about Japan for a bit. I'm going to give a quick synopsis of the trip. And I will put pictures of the trip on our Rainy Day Rabbit Holes pod Instagram, which go follow that, please. So we spent the first 4 days in Tokyo, but getting there was a little bit of an adventure because me and my infinite wisdom decided that we needed to arrive in Japan together. And I live near Seattle. My brother lives in Phoenix, Arizona. So we decided to meet in Los Angeles. So we both would fly to Los Angeles and then fly to Tokyo together from Los Angeles. Well, I booked us a 10 a.m. Monday flight out of Los Angeles to Tokyo, which means that we had to go the day before to Los Angeles.
Spend the night in LA.
So we did, where we both got in at midnight. Both of us had delays, so we didn't get to the hotel till like 2 a.m.
Oh, gosh.
And then, of course, I couldn't sleep because my insomnia decided to rear its head. So I got 3 hours of sleep. Our flight from LA to Tokyo was delayed by almost 2 hours. We sat on the tarmac that whole time. And then, because of the headwinds, instead of it taking about 9.5 hours, the flight took 12.5 hours.
Sounds like you took a vacation with me.
Yeah. You were there in spirit.
Okay. Sent you my voodoo.
Oh my God. I know, this way we're not flying together to Hawaii. We're flying separately.
That's right. You use your miles on Delta. I'm using my Alaska.
Exactly. So we got to Tokyo. Oh, also, I sweated the entire way there. The plane was so hot.
I've never heard of this.
And then I got to
I
Tokyo.
take blankets with me.
Oh, so hot. So I was already sweaty and miserable because I'm tired. I slept maybe an hour on the flight. I was so tired. We were like delirious by the time we got there. And then I discovered, because the previous time we went to Japan, I went in January. So being hot wasn't an issue. But I discovered that buildings in Japan have a huge lack of airflow. They just don't seem to turn on ventilation or air conditioning. So everywhere where you're inside is stuffy and hot.
That's what I was going to say. It seems
Yeah.
thick.
So I'm sweating in line to get through.
You're sharing a lot of lungs air in and out. It's not getting filtered.
I know. And everybody also is like, been in the same underwear for how many hours?
And you're breathing it.
We flew into Haneda, which is the smaller airport that's actually closer to Tokyo than Narita. So if you ever go to Japan, everyone, fly into Haneda. It is a lot easier to get through and a lot closer than Narita. But the carpet in the area where you go through customs, it smelled like piss in there. And with no air ventilation. So I'm sweating already and it smells. So by the time we were supposed to land in Tokyo at 2:30, but we didn't land until almost 6. And then we had to go through customs. And then in the airport, I had to go get our pocket Wi-Fi so that I could, actually navigate us around, which I'm so glad. If you go, either have the international package on your phone, get an eSIM, or get your pocket Wi-Fi. It's invaluable. And then we had to go buy
How much is a pocket Wi-Fi?
It was $60 for the trip.
Oh, the whole trip.
Isn't that bad?
No.
Yeah. So we could split it because multiple devices can use the
So
signal.
would that be better to take on a cruise than their $500 upgrade?
I don't know if we can get a pocket Wi-Fi here like that, but
Okay.
you can get an eSIM if your phone is unlocked. So it wouldn't have worked for Mexico or for Canada anyway because my phone's not unlocked.
Yeah.
And then also, for some reason, I just printed out what train I was supposed to get on instead of hooking up my pocket Wi-Fi and getting the directions there. And we got on the wrong train. It was the right train, but it was going the wrong direction.
Oh, no.
So
How long were you going the wrong way?
about 20 minutes. So then we had to get off, figure out where we were, get on back
Go
on
back.
the train and backtrack. So we didn't get to our hotel till almost 8 o'clock. I was so tired.
8 p.m.?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. But we stayed in an area of Tokyo called Asakusa. It should be pronounced Asakusa, but it's pronounced Asakusa. And that is where, if you ever see the pictures of the giant red lanterns and like a big red pagoda in Tokyo, that's Shinsoji Temple. We had to walk through that to get to our hotel. So that was magical. At
was gonna
night,
say, yeah.
they light up the temple, they light up the pagodas, they light up those lanterns. And it was amazing. I would stay at the hotel. Was great. Hotel Monday, clean, modern. Our room was huge for Tokyo standards. We got the family room, and with only 2 beds, it was giant. We had a little couch and a table, and the toilet even had its own room separate from the rest of the bathroom, which was nice.
I was going to say, wait, don't they all?
Yeah, well, but they did this thing. A lot of Japanese bathrooms have basically a wet room for the bathing facilities. So it has a short, deep tub, which was nice because you can fill it up and sit in it and be submerged. And the shower is literally next to it, but it's the whole room. So the whole room is lined with the plastics so that because you bathing in your own filth, then you have to wash it off, right? That's the idea. Or you scrub yourself really well before you get in the bath. So you can just like scrub
Right.
yourself standing next to the bathtub, then get in the bathtub. That's that.
And not sit in your own filth.
Exactly, not sit in your own people soup. It was great because to get to the train station, you walk through the temple grounds.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
It was so great. I loved it there so much. We did a bunch of Tokyo stuff. And then from there, we went to Hakone, which is one of the areas around one of the lakes of Mount Fuji. So it's around Lake, I think it's Lake Asi? No, Lake Asahi? Something like that. I'm sorry. I'm probably wrong. And we stayed at this cool hotel. Our room had a view of the lake. And the day that we left, we had the most glorious view of Mount Fuji.
Oh, wow.
Which is rare because Fuji is not often visible. And the day before it had been raining. We got to see a tiny sliver of Mount Fuji. And my brother was like, well, this is the first time I've seen Mount Fuji. And this is my 3rd time here.
Oh, wow.
But then the next day, fully clear, full view of the mountain from the hotel.
Mountain was out.
It was so gorgeous. Then we headed up to Takayama, which is in like the Japanese Alps, basically in the Gifu prefecture. And that town is really cool. First off, my brother and I were walking through the streets and I was like, God, this reminds me of Denver, Colorado so much. Just like the way the streets feel. I'm like, I'm getting such strong Denver vibes. It was so weird. And then later on, as we're walking around town, we see the Denver Sister City Memorial Park.
Oh, that's funny.
Denver is Takayama's sister city.
Oh, that's so funny.
I had no idea. But Takayama has this whole section of streets that's preserved like merchant buildings from the Edo period. So it's like walking into the past. And there's all sorts of shops and sake breweries. And it was so cool. We went to this open air museum called Hida no Sato, and it's set up to be a replica of an old folk village. So did I show you the pictures? Did I send you that slideshow? Oh,
I got a few in the beginning.
I'll
the
have to
light
send
show.
you the slideshow so that you can see all the pictures. And I'll post these pictures on Instagram too. So it's basically these peak roofed, thatch roofed houses that are traditional houses. And they were moved there from an old village. So they're real. It's just they didn't exist in this site before it was set up as a museum. So much cool history. So beautiful. The day was gorgeous. The fall colors were coming in. And for some reason in this location, they were really concentrated. So we got the bright reds and oranges. And both of us just had such a good time. Went sake tasting.
So is it, I heard you say sake brewery. It's not a distillery, it's a brewery?
No, sake's brewed. It's kind of similar to how they brew beer, but it's brewed with rice. So they mill the rice down and then they add it's koji, which is a I can't remember if it's a fungus and a yeast, but they ferment it like that. And then it's brewed more like beer than it is distilled. It's not distilled. So distilling, you basically are boiling some sort of already fermented alcohol. So you can take beer and you can distill beer down into a spirit.
Right.
But a lot of times it's fermented sugar, whether it's coming from rum is like cane sugar. Vodka can be from potatoes or grapes or other things. And whiskey is from malt grain. And you basically ferment it down until it's now has an alcohol content. And then you boil it and the steam goes up and the alcohol is collected and distilled out.
That's how sake tastes to me. I'm surprised it's brewed.
Yeah. No, it's brewed, not distilled. Yeah. Takayama was awesome. I wish I had another day there. It was so beautiful. I'd go back in a heartbeat. Up in the mountains, more rural. So you're away from the big city. It was so magical. We loved it. And from there, we went to Osaka. And Osaka is the second biggest city in Japan. And I think I mentioned before, it is fucking chaos there. It was bonkers. And it was such a harsh clash from the beautiful, quiet countryside we had just come from. So I was miserable the first day we got there. Our hotel sucked.
Oh. Is this your third hotel now?
Fourth hotel now. And we stayed at this hotel chain in Takayama, and it was fine. It was a nice, clean, new, modern building, and the room was small but clean and well appointed. I had 4 pillows. And then, so that was a Hotel Wing International we stayed at in Takayama. And then so we stayed at a Hotel Wing International in Osaka. And the rooms were shabby, smaller somehow. And you got 1 pillow, 1 towel.
For 2 people?
No, we
One
each
each?
had our own rooms.
Okay.
If you wanted another pillow, you were charged a rental fee daily. It wasn't a lot. It was 100 yen, which is like 70 cents, but the principle of the thing.
Yeah.
And the air conditioning, which you had to run the air conditioning because it was so stuffy and hot in there, smelled like mildew and piss.
Ugh.
So
That makes you wonder what you're breathing.
Yeah. And I couldn't leave the door open because we're in the middle, or the window open because we're in the middle of a city and it was noisy.
Oh, yeah.
Because right behind the hotel is one of these entertainment alleys. It's like these covered streets. They had a lot of covered shopping streets in Japan. And this one was a covered street that was like the entertainment street. So it was a lot of host and hostess bars and karaoke bars. And people in Osaka like to party.
I was going to say, that sounds noisy for sure.
So very noisy. So there's no way you can leave the window open at night. So you had to rely on the air conditioning. And it had 2 settings. Freeze your balls off or not on.
Oh, no. I would hate that. Oh, so all night long, I'd be up and down, turn that off. No.
And then you get hot and you're stuffy. And the whole time it's blowing this nasty smelling air on you. I tried spraying like room deodorizer into the air conditioning, but then it just sprays it in your face.
How long were you at that hotel?
5 days.
Oh, golly.
Because it was
like
the
longest stay.
I know. It was our base to go visit places like Kyoto and Himeji. Osaka's got some cool stuff. It's got Osaka Castle. You can go to Dotonbori, which is like, it's this cool, vibrant neighborhood that's around the river that runs through Osaka. And it's very Instagrammable. Like if you go on Instagram and you follow a Japan Instagram, you'll see for sure pictures of and videos of Dotonbori. But other than that, I'm like, really honestly, people could spend 1, maybe 2 nights in Osaka, and that's it. I wish we had stayed in Kyoto because we actually went to Kyoto twice. So Kyoto has the highest concentration of still existing temples and shrines in Japan. And so that's why it's so popular, is because there's tons of them.
And how old are these? I'm imagining hundreds of years
Hundreds of years old. We went to one temple in Himeji that was established in 966.
Oh my gosh. So
where people even
thousands
alive
of
then.
years old, or almost
1,000 years old, yeah.
Where people even alive.
America doesn't have a history like that.
Right. No,
I mean,
not
at
at
least
all.
our own European settler history. You know,
Right.
The native populations have that history, but their history was not written. It was oral.
You won't find the infrastructure. From
Right, and they
hundreds
didn't
of years,
build. They didn't build buildings like
from 1,000 years ago here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Kyoto, we went to twice. We did some of the hits. We did Fushimi Inari Shrine is this amazing place that has thousands of red torii gates that go up the mountain, up Mount Nara. And you climb up them and you're getting high. We did 87 floors up that day. And
You're getting high in elevation.
high in elevation. Yeah. No, pot is illegal in Japan, and don't even think about trying to bring it in because you will get deported and arrested.
Just deported?
You'll get arrested.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, they
usually
have
it's more than that.
zero tolerance for drugs in Japan. And if you go, though, you have to go early, like 7 a.m. because it gets really crowded and it loses its magic, and people are stopping to try to take their pictures and stuff like that, and it gets real annoying. But we did that, and then we went to a flea market that was held once a month on the grounds of Toji Temple. And Toji Temple is this huge temple facility with Goda and a huge temple. And there's this huge flea market in it. And it was like used kimonos and handmade goods and antiques and food. It was incredible. If anybody goes, try to go where you can be in Kyoto on the 21st of the month and go to this flea market. It was
Just
amazing.
on the 21st of every month.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. And so we did 6 miles before 11.
Oh, wow.
Because of the climbing up the mountain. We went to Kiyomizu-dera, which is a big temple in Kyoto that's very popular. It's beautiful. We went to Kinkuji, which is the Golden Pavilion. Beautiful. Gorgeous. We got there at opening, so it wasn't too crowded yet. I mean, it was crowded, but not bad. And then we went to, was it Nikishi Market? I think is what it's called. I could be mispronouncing that. Which is this, again, covered shopping street, but it's like food stalls and produce and fish. And it's really popular, great food. So it was amazing.
Lots of markets, it sounds
A lot of
like.
markets. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the shopping streets are cool. Every big city has multiple shopping streets that are covered, and it'll be like a mile or two of shopping streets that you just walk through, and there's shops and restaurants, but it's all covered. It's really weird. I loved it though. We met up with some people that I know in Osaka. So the people we went with the first time, Kairu's brother Takeshi lives in Kobe, him and his wife Etsuko. And so they met us and took us out to Okonomiyaki, and then we went out drinking and got, as Takeshi calls it, yoi yoi.
Yoi yoi.
We got yoi yoi with
that
Takeshi. Yeah. I love it.
Yoi yoi.
And he's just like the life of the party. He's so cool. I love Takeshi. His wife is amazing. She's studying French. At one point, she's like, I was like, did you just pop out some French?
Now I'm confused.
I know.
I'm an American in Japan. Do not bring up French.
And then probably our favorite day of the whole trip was when we went to Himeji. Himeji Castle is about 900 years old. It's undergone 2 major restorations, and it's often called like the White Heron because it's this all white castle, and it sits up like proudly over the city. And during World War II, the residents covered the castle with camouflage. And so the whole city was bombed around it, but the castle remained. And so when they took off the camouflage, here's this white shining beacon of hope.
Oh, nice.
And that was kind of what they built the city, or built it back up around, was this castle was their symbol of hope. And it's just freaking amazing. It's so cool. It's so massive. The scale of it is insane. It's like 6 stories. It's incredible. It's so gorgeous. And then we decided to go visit this temple that's behind the castle. And I'm not going to give the name because I don't want people to go there because I want it to remain quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And we went later in the afternoon, like 3:30, but there was almost nobody there. Most of the time we were by ourselves. And we're walking up this dirt road. I think we went the wrong way.
Again.
But we're hiking up this road by ourselves. It's beautiful. The sun's out, but it's starting to get towards dusk. And we keep seeing all these signs for beware of bears, beware of boars, and beware of bees.
Bears, boars, and bees.
And when they say bees, they don't mean bees. They mean murder hornets.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm
Yeah.
picturing the big giant ones.
Which we did see some small ones that were about 1.5 inches long. And I was like, then freaked out anytime an insect would go by me. I'm like, oh my God, it's a murder hornet. And we also noticed as we're looking off, because we're talking about getting lost in the woods at this point, in between every single tree trunk was the most massive spider webs I've ever found in my life. I have this amazing picture of the sun shining through all of these spider webs, and they're spanning 15, 20-foot distances.
Crazy.
Between trees. And we got up close to one and saw the spider in it. It was the biggest spider I've ever seen in my life. And it was acid green with red and black stripes. And the legs were black and yellow striped.
So just straight out of some horror
Yep,
film.
100%. I was like, oh, we're not hiking
No.
outside of the off of the trail.
That's just the beginning of things we don't understand there, I would imagine.
I know. And then you could be killed by a wild boar or a bear or murder hornets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just keep that in mind if you decide to go hiking in Japan. Boars will kill you. They will fuck you up. Mm-hmm, yeah. Mm-hmm. And they come down into populated areas. It's not just out in the middle of nowhere. We hike up this road. We cross this beautiful stone bridge, which I have this picture that is so Japan to me. There's this beautiful old stone bridge. There's a traditional building that's several hundred years old. And in front of that building is 2 vending machines. It's the most Japanese thing ever because vending machines are everywhere.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
And you can get things other than like snacks.
Yeah, most of them are drinks, or soft drinks and water and hot coffee. You can get hot cans of coffee and tea.
Oh,
you can get
wow.
hot corn soup. Yeah, the hot corn soup in a can
Wow.
is delicious. But they have vending machines for alcohol, for ramen, for insects, feeder insects and live insects.
And you want those for?
Well, the feeder insects for feeding your reptiles, but then the live insects, I don't know, for pets. Vending machines for bananas. I saw those vending machines for oranges, ice cream, of course. Yeah, sandwiches,
Self-serve is
donuts. Yeah, they like their convenience there.
Yeah.
But we walk across that bridge after seeing that, and we look up, and there's this, we see the underside of this wooden balcony, like the support that's holding up this temple. And it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, we both stopped and just stood quietly in awe of this. There's not another person around. The beautiful fall colors are starting to come in. And it's this massive temple. I'll put pictures of it. And we walk up and we get to where we would walk up some stairs to the entrance. And I just stop in awe. And at this point, I started to weep because, I mean, I'm crying even thinking about it. Like, it was so, there's something about it that was almost like a religious experience.
Yeah.
And I'm not religious. It's like, am I Buddhist now?
No.
And I look over at my brother and he has tears streaming down his face. It's hard to describe what that feeling was and what brought it on, but it was just it was ancient, right? It's over 1,000 years old that this has been there being served by the Buddhist monks. And we go inside and there was this huge like cauldron that's where they burn the incense. So there's the smell of incense in the air and there's the smoke. And there's nobody there except for the monk. And the monk is he's transferring the offerings from different altars throughout the temple to the main altar. And we just stood there and just like almost my heart hurt.
Wow.
It was amazing.
It was overwhelming.
It was so overwhelming. Both of us were overwhelmed. And then we walk up another trail and come around the corner. And then when they're in this crazy huge temple complex that is made up of 3 buildings and this huge grounds in the middle, like you can imagine them like training samurais there.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, not a single person. This is
Was it the hour? Was it the time of year? Or is it just like this that you can be there by yourself?
But it was starting to get dusk. So I don't know if it was so late. Like, we caught the last ropeway down. Mm-hmm. And there is also a spot that has a lookout over the whole city of Himeji and into the sea. And it's really kind of cool because the city almost looks like the sea and it like blends into the sea. Mm-hmm. And it was at sunset. I'll post this picture. Oh. It's so beautiful.
Did you take it with your regular camera or your phone?
My phone. I didn't take my regular camera that day because I was like, I got tired of hauling it around and babysitting it. Mm-hmm. But I have some amazing pictures anyway. It's so good. I'll post all those. Anyway, that was amazing. We made our way back up to Tokyo. And then we spent a day in Kamakura in Yokohama. Kamakura was amazing. We went to the Great Buddha. So cool. I love Kamakura. It feels like San Diego.
Oh, wow.
Like the
vibe?
The vibe of like the residential areas near the beach. Mm-hmm. It's a big surfing town too. They have got a big, beautiful bay that's popular for surfing. Saw some cool temples there. Went to Yokohama. Went to the ramen museum.
There's a museum for ramen?
The ramen there isn't that great, but it's such a cool museum, and it's like ramen mecca, right?
Yes.
They give you you can buy smaller bowls of ramen, but so it's like half the size of a regular bowl. I did three. Why did I hold up 4 fingers?
So then you can try different ones. Oh my
I
gosh.
was so full. Oh my God.
Sample ramen.
And the sodium.
Like a flight of ramen. You had a flight of ramen.
I was sweating
my
from
gosh.
the sodium.
I'm so glad we're going after this for ramen.
We're going to go to ramen after this. So that was kind of my trip to Japan in a nutshell. I missed home. I missed my husband. I missed my cat, but I miss Japan so much now. I want to go back. And my mom was like, send me pictures of everything you're eating. And we mostly ate like sandwiches from 7-Eleven and Fami Chiki from Family Mart.
Fami Chiki.
Oh, I miss Fami Chiki. But the best thing I ate, I think, was the pickle. Just a Japanese cucumber pickled. It was so delicious. So I came home and I made Japanese pickles. I'll make them again and let you have some. I pickle them in beer.
Oh.
And they're so fucking
Interesting.
good. Yes.
And are they the little cucumbers then?
Yeah, there's a smaller. I had to use Persian cucumbers because I couldn't get Japanese cucumbers. So, and then you cut them into chunks and pickle them that way. And they're so good, salty and savory. And So it was amazing. I want to go back so bad.
Well, tie us into the Pacific Northwest here.
Yes, I know. How long have I been talking about Japan? 30 minutes? Okay. Let's move along. So in order for me to talk about Japan, I figured I need to tie it into the Pacific Northwest somehow. So I started looking into the history of the Japanese community in Seattle. And so I'm going to take us back again to the gold rush. So back like we were in Chinatown.
1848.
So the California Gold Rush officially started in 1848. And so word of the California Gold Rush made its way around the world. And about 300,000 people flocked to California with the dreams of striking it rich. And this included people from other countries. So it did reach Asia and China as well. Around 25,000 Chinese immigrated to California in just the 1950s alone. And 1850s. I keep saying 1950s. So. A little different time. So Japan at that time was undergoing a major cultural shift. They were going from a feudal way of life, an era, into a more modern era. So the shift took a huge toll on some of the poorest communities in Japan. So the lower class, the farmers, were saddled with more taxes. And then also the price of rice was falling significantly because less rice was starting to be eaten because modern Western diets were starting to become very popular. And so thousands of farmers lost their homes and their lands. And the gold rush sounded like a way to start a new life. So a lot of Japanese left Japan with the hopes of starting a new life in the United States with the gold rush. But as we heard before about when I talked about the Chinese immigrants during this time, not a lot of people were successful in striking it rich with the gold rush. There were taxes imposed on foreign miners, like we talked about before, which that tax I think it's like $20 a month, which is about $800 and something a month in today's funds. So it's very
and this
hard.
wasn't for everyone, right? It was just for
It was supposed to be all foreign miners, but it was mostly just imposed against Asian.
Got ya.
So there was a lot of anti-Asian sentiment at this time. So the immigrants started turning to other means of making a living, and the railroad was one of the biggest employers of Asian labor, as well as the agricultural industry and fishing. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 essentially cut off that cheap labor from China. And that was just the Chinese Exclusion Act. So the Japanese immigrants moved in to fill that void. It was in high demand, this cheap labor, for not only building the railroad, but lumber and farming and fishing.
Right. Anything they could practically enslave them into doing physical labor.
Exactly. At this point, there was also a fairly large Japanese community in Hawaii. They started immigrating there in 1868. So if you guys have ever been to Honolulu, there's a big Japantown, and there's a huge Japanese community in Hawaii.
To this day, yeah.
To this day, yeah. Well, it's fairly close, right? To Japan, it's closer than the States. Oh, hold on. We're going to refill. We're drinking a partially sparkling wine from somewhere. Not the Pacific Northwest.
Does that say Italy?
Is it
you have your
Italian?
glass and you have your glasses on. I might be just wishful thinking.
It does say Italy.
What?
It is a semi-sparkling dry white wine. Bottled by a German company. So
we're
maybe it's
having-
the Italian style.
Got you. Italian style. German.
Hey, I don't mind a German wine.
I don't mind
Except for they
wine.
like their reds cold, which is weird. Here, there's a splash.
I kind of do too. A little
There's
bit
a
cold.
splash left. So when word went out that labor was needed on the West Coast, a large-scale Japanese immigration began, not only from Japan directly, but from Hawaii. And this is when a lot of Japanese started moving throughout the West Coast into Oregon and Washington, because we have a lot of lumber and fishing up here. And the people who had gone to California hoping to strike it rich on gold now were finding themselves having to move around the West Coast to make a living.
Do they help with the railroads as well?
Absolutely. So there was a time where the Japanese vastly outweighed the Chinese laborers on the railroad during that, because of that Exclusion Act of 1882.
Right.
The Japanese definitely helped build the railroads. Ship owners would recruit through ads these ships that would go to Japan and bring people back. They painted a picture of America being a land where gems were just laying around in the street and like gold grew on trees.
It's like a utopia.
Yeah, exactly. So they lured people over here.
Gold grows
And one
on
of the
trees.
brokers, the biggest brokers who recruited labor from Japan, was the Oriental Trading Company of Seattle. So they mostly signed up people from the Hiroshima and Wakayama prefectures.
And how long were they around? That sounds like
I think it's still
Right,
like
that's what I
there's
was
still a
thinking.
building in Seattle that says
okay,
Oriental
that's what I
Trading
was-
Company.
That's what
Yeah.
I thought I remembered.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if it still exists as a company or if they just kept that sign on the building.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the best name for modern times. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I can't believe it's still there.
Seattle was one of the first ports to initiate trade with Japan because it is about 30 hours closer than the ports of California. And it's only about 13 days by ship, which it seems like it should be longer, but that's not that bad. 13
Yeah,
days.
not at all.
Yeah. The first regular commercial service between Japan and the U.S. was the Mike Maru, and she came to port on August 31st, 1896. And she brought along 488 tons of freight, 8 passengers, and 253 immigrants. And this became the first major shipping line between Japan and Seattle. And the first recorded Japanese resident in Washington was 1880.
Oh, wow.
The Japanese were coming from California, Oregon, Hawaii, and mainland Japan.
So almost 30 years after the gold rush, we start making them
Because
citizens.
people aren't making money on the gold like they thought they would. In 1890, there were only 125 Japanese in Seattle, but by 1900, that number had grown to 3,900. Definitely a lot moved here from 1890 to 1900.
And what were they moving to this area for?
So they were mostly employed in fishing, sawmill labor, and railway construction.
Okay.
Yeah. More and more Japanese at this time, though, started to set down deeper roots. They were building farms. They were becoming merchants. There in Seattle itself, there was a lot of Japanese-owned hotels and inns and restaurants. They were making a home here. It wasn't just transient labor. You know, if you have a big farm, there was a lot of huge farms providing produce to Seattle. I think at one point they said that Japanese farms provided 95% of all of the strawberries eaten on the West Coast.
Wow.
Yeah.
We actually knew a Japanese family in Fife who at the time had a farm. It's not there anymore. From that time had been handed down through generations. And they had still been farming from that time. What is that? Almost 200 years. It's
Yeah.
150 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. So there was beginning to build a pretty big community. And a lot of Japanese were also coming to Washington State to attend the University of Washington.
Oh, when was that?
In the early 1900s. So by the 1910s, the Japanese were running restaurants, inns, large farms. And then in 1908, the United States and Japan entered into a quote unquote gentleman's agreement where Japan voluntarily stopped issuing passports for Japanese to come to the United States. However, interestingly enough, it only applied to the men. Wives could still come. What would happen is Japanese that were living here in the United States would send back home to their home village saying that I want a wife. And so his family and the women's family would arrange a marriage and just send pictures back and forth. And then they would send that bride back to the United States.
Holy cow.
But
Mail order bride.
Japanese marriages were not recognized by the United States at that point. So it was,
So if you were Japanese
So you couldn't
and
come
married.
here and legally get married. It was very complicated. It was very racist and weird.
That is weird. Like, so if you can't, so you could just not get married.
I mean, they got married, but it just wasn't like legally recognized. In 1924, the Immigration Act of 1924
Easy to remember.
was enacted in the U.S., virtually cutting off all immigration from Asia. Despite this, the Japanese community in Washington began to grow because people were coming here from other parts of the United States. So because it's a great place to start a farm. We have really fertile soil, we have good growing conditions, lots of water, and then the fishing industry and the timber industry all need cheap labor. So it was a great place to come and start a life. The Japanese were the largest minority group in the Seattle area, and their impact could be seen throughout the 20s and 30s. By 1930, there was a huge Japanese community in Seattle, and it was made up of more than half what they call, I hope I say this right, Nikkei. Ni and I is 2. And so that's second generation. So that's Japanese Americans that were born on American soil and are natural born American citizens. So it's more than half of the community in Seattle have been born here and are American citizens. And I want you to keep that in mind. That's very important. These are American citizens. They are going to American schools. They are taught English. They are taught American customs. They are American citizens. They pay taxes. They vote. They are American citizens. Okay? I'm putting that in your brain there. These are American citizens. Let's take a little break.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready for things to get dark again?
Let's get dark. Shay's going dark.
I'm ruining everything for you. Shay ruins history again.
Shay ruining the day. Whatever it is, whatever the topic, Shay will fuck it up.
Oh, speaking of ruining things, I stuck my foot in my mouth last night at my friend Shay's party.
No.
So she's like, oh, my friend so-and-so. I can't remember names. Sorry, everyone. I remember Sam. Sam, if you listen to this, it was a blast talking to you. I hope we meet again. Yeah, Sam was awesome. She's like, my friend here is doing keto. And I was like, oh man, keto totally fucked up my digestive system. And she'd look on her face was just like, her face fell. And I was like, oh, but if it's working for you, that's great. It just didn't work for me. Anyway,
I like to ruining the day again.
Shay ruining the day again.
This is where you're like, Keith.
I'm going to tell you something negative about the thing you like.
Oh, did I upset you? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I ruin that thing that you love? I do have a tendency of doing that.
I didn't mean to be an asshole. My intention was not an asshole.
My intention was just to be a know-it-all. Right? I realize that about myself. I'm a little bit of a know-it-all. If I know a little bit about a subject, I'm going to set you straight on it. Like I'm doing right here. Okay. So
set me straight, Shay.
I'm setting you straight. Okay. So I found this really interesting because this was something that I'd never learned in history. I mean, I learned about World War II briefly, and we did hear about the internment of Japanese Americans, but it didn't really sink in about what an atrocity that was until I started researching this.
I honestly don't remember learning about that until I was an adult. Now, to be fair, I wasn't exactly a solid high school student.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I was doing bare minimum, just whatever kept me on the sports field.
Right.
I need those grades. That's all I cared about. So, I mean, I could totally have missed this, but I do not recall ever discussing the Japanese internment camps.
I think it was like one paragraph in the history book.
Yeah, like let's just
brush over it.
We're going to brush right over it.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about
this. And so when
this.
I heard about it, I was like, that did not happen in this country that recently.
That's modern times.
Sure enough, it did happen.
Yep. So with the outbreak of World War II, anti-Japanese sentiment, racism, and war hysteria grew. And then on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And that's where things took a turn. So on February 19th, 1942, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066, which authorized the removal of any suspected enemies, including anyone of even partial Japanese heritage, from certain new militarized zones. And this was the West Coast. So the West Coast was split up into multiple militarized zones, and they enforced this. So at first...
And how did they determine what the militarized zones
I'm not sure
are?
how. It was split up really weird because I know that like the Japanese Americans from most of Western Washington went to one camp, but then like the Bainbridge Island residents went to another camp, and Oregon went to another camp, and California went to another camp. It was, I don't know. I almost went deeper on this, and I was like, this is going to be a 3-hour podcast about how these militarized zones were set up and the really, really racist people in the military that just, wanted to get rid of all Asian Americans. It was not good.
It's a lot. I feel like you could do this is Rainy Day Rabbit Holes podcast, not Ken Burns on PBS, but you could totally go there.
Oh, geez, yeah. We could have this be a 3-hour podcast if I were really to delve into this more. And I had to like tone things back so it's not a 3-hour podcast. At first, this meant that the Japanese Americans were forced to leave these areas and migrate inland away from the West Coast. But the government was freezing the bank accounts of the Japanese in America. So that meant that most people could not afford to leave. So they're stuck where they're at. And also they were enforcing curfews from 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. So you couldn't leave. During those times. You can only leave during the day. And then in March, a proclamation forbid Japanese Americans from changing their residency. So they were trapped in these military zones. So then I must have made a mistake here because I have 1,200,000. No, that's not right. I think it was 120,000. Nikkei, both citizens and aliens, were forcibly removed from their homes and placed in temporary assembly centers and later into permanent concentration camps. Nearly 70,000 of these people were American citizens.
Yes, that family I was telling you about that owned farmland, ran a farm until very recently. They were put in an internment camp, and the kindness of their neighbors. They ran their farms for them for free and kept them afloat until they were released.
Yeah, which is amazing. And that's what ended up having to happen.
They still had it.
They had about 3 days notice to put their affairs in order before they were moved out of their homes. So most people lost everything. They lost their homes. Right. They lost their source of income.
This is America.
Look, 70,000 of 120,000 people were American citizens. Like, I can't stress that enough. They fire sold everything that they could. People with long-term leases on farmland relied on the kindness of their neighbors if they could to store their equipment or transfer their leases, work their land. The other thing is, the Japanese that were being forced out of their home were forced by the government to continue to attend to their crops and harvest crops up until they were left. If they did anything like plowing their fields under, they would be put in prison. It would be considered an act of sabotage.
Because they supplied so much of the food.
And at this time, the government was still encouraging anyone who is an American citizen to join the military and serve.
Is that your alternative to your concentration camp? And then what about your families and everybody else? Like, wow. So
people in Washington area were a little bit more fortunate in that they kept families together. The Japanese Canadians in British Columbia, they went through the same thing, only slightly worse. They took the men and forced them into prisoner of war camps and labor camps. And then they took the women and children and they moved them to towns that had been basically abandoned. So they kind of rebuilt them. They did not let people go back to British Columbia to their homes until 1949.
Wow.
Conditions were so bad that the citizens of Japan were sending food to the incarcerees in British Columbia.
Wow.
Wartime Japan was like, holy shit, you're treating the Japanese terrible over there. They're starving, and sending them food.
You're treating the Americans
with,
or I guess
Canadians.
in this case, Canadians with Japanese backgrounds, or heritage, poorly.
Yeah.
You're treating your own citizens this poorly.
About 30,000 Japanese Americans served in World War II.
Say it again.
About 30,000 Japanese Americans served the American Army in World War II.
Wow. And so when they let them out of the concentration camps are we called internment camps? Sorry. The internment camps to participate in our armed forces, their families were still stuck in the internment camps.
And then
they didn't get to be out based on this.
And if one of those servicemen died in war, the families could not attend the funeral because they couldn't leave the concentration camps. I would just call them concentration camps.
Right.
Let's
Would
not
they
try to
at
pretty up.
least be able to leave then and go back to Japan after?
No, they couldn't.
Wow. Even though they have now no patriarch during a patriarchal time.
The Seattle's Nikkei community, along with those from Alaska, were forced to evacuate their homes, and they were all transferred to the Puyallup Assembly Center. And this is where this ties into where Jody and I live. So we live not far from Puyallup. So we live near the Washington State Fairgrounds of Puyallup, and that has been a fairground since the turn of the century. So annual fair in September. But it was the largest facility that had buildings that could be transformed into barracks in Washington State. There was about 7,500 people transferred there and kept prisoner at the Puyallup Fairgrounds at what was coined Camp Harmony by Army propaganda, Army public
I was
relations.
going to say, look at us, make it nice and sweet. Not Camp Harmony.
Camp Harmony. As if they're going there for summer camp.
So do you know the current buildings there? Any of those?
I don't know. I don't think
Some
they
of them
do.
seem very new.
Most of the buildings at the Puyallup Fairgrounds are new. There's a couple that are a little bit older, but I don't know if anything other than maybe the dairy barns are super old.
Right.
I spent many summers there because I was in the 4-H project and I raised goats, and I would show my goats at the Puyallup Fair. I'd do baking championships. I do baking competitions.
winner.
I was so competitive. I have a box of rosettes because I was like, I must be number one. Sewing stuff. I did public speaking. Like, I spent so much of my childhood at the Puyallup
You won
Fair.
it all.
Yeah. I was goat bowl champion. I can still name the 4 compartments of a goat's stomach. Omasum, abomasum, rumen, and rectilium. Yeah. Okay. They don't have 4 stomachs. They have 4 compartments in their stomach that do different things in their processing of cellulose.
Nice. So basically like our intestinal system
Yeah.
does very different things. They just have
Yeah.
stomach compartments.
So it was just blew me away that I've spent so much time at this place and never knew the dark history of it.
Right. That's why I kind of want to know if we knew of any of the buildings or where they stayed.
I should have
or
looked to see if there
then
was any still existing buildings
when I'm
from
there,
when
I
it was
can-
Camp Harmony.
I can transport myself back, or I can
You know what?
literally see that place from my office at work.
Let's go to the fair next year and let's ruin the fair for some people.
Yes. You want to go in the spring?
Yeah, and we'll
mean,
just
less
let's
impactful.
just walk up to random people and tell them,
Hey, did you know? We'll take out our microphones. We'll be like,
Yes.
Hey, did you know?
let's do it. Let's ruin the fair.
1948, where you're standing, or 1945 or whatever.
42.
42. Where you're standing was once
A concentration camp for
what they called
Japanese.
an internment camp. We're just going to be honest and call it a concentration camp. I don't know. We didn't gas anyone, right? No gas chambers?
No, we weren't murdering people. And at Camp Harmony,
Just their souls.
yeah, we just murdered their livelihoods and their homes and their souls. And it wasn't great there because this is not meant to be a place where people live. They turned them into
That's what I remember
They turned them
reading,
into
yeah.
temporary barracks, and they had to build latrines and mess halls and stuff like that. But the roofs were made of tar paper, so they leaked. And it rains a lot here in the spring, and the rain's cold.
Yeah.
And it's miserable, and it would soak people's bedding and clothes.
Musty.
Oh, can you imagine the smell of mildew? Families were squashed into a 20 by 20 room, and they had cots and one light bulb and a pot-bellied stove. No running water. They had the latrines were literally a plank with holes. No dividers. So when you had to take a dump, you were sitting
You're
cheek
looking left,
to cheek with another person. Like, just
So
humiliating.
Exactly. That's inhumane.
It is.
That's
And
dehumanizing,
it is. It's very dehumanizing.
which they already dehumanize them, or else they could
Exactly.
not have done this.
Exactly.
You cannot do this to another human being.
No.
So you dehumanize them, and then you can do this.
What-
Was there any evidence that we needed to do this
No.
for our safety?
No.
Like,
What does a second generation Japanese farmer have to do with the Japanese bombing Pearl Harbor? Nothing.
right. I mean, that's what I was hoping.
Maybe they
we
have
would know.
family still in Japan, but also,
Right.
what does the normal resident of Japan have to do with it? Nothing.
Right.
The people there were just trying to live their lives too. It's governments playing games. It doesn't have anything to do
Always.
with the citizens.
Always.
Yeah,
Always.
it's maddening. Food was B ration army rations, like Vienna sausages.
Oh, Keith's favorite. He would have survived just fine.
There was barely any fresh produce, and
Which is what they live off.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's their normal.
yeah. Gastrointestinal diseases, of course, ran rampant. Mm-hmm. And because there was a curfew in the barracks, there were times where the guards thought that there was insurrection and riots happening because people had raging diarrhea after curfew and were running to the latrines. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Super fun. Inmates later recalled the barracks as being as nothing more than a shed on a chicken ranch.
Yeah, mud.
Yeah, in the
Mildew,
springtime, they would be wading through ankle-deep mud to get to the mess hall and the latrines. But work opportunities did start, that people were volunteering to prepare food. The infirmary was made up of all Nikkei doctors, nurses, and pharmacists. And it was an infirmary, not really a hospital, but even so, during the internment and Camp Harmony, there were 37 births, 11 deaths, and in August alone, 7 operating room surgeries and 2,260 outpatient procedures.
I'm surprised at 11 deaths.
Yeah. It was probably mostly older people, I'm assuming. I didn't see specifics on that. I'm sure there was probably some disease.
I would have just pictured more with all that
Yeah.
being so confined. It was hygiene almost impossible to maintain.
Yeah,
and lack of vegetables.
The shower facilities was one big room with a perforated pipe in the ceiling that would just spray water down. And then to wash your clothes, you had to go to another building and then take them back to your barracks to dry. But as we know in Western Washington, stuff doesn't dry when you hang it in the spring. So I could only imagine the smell of, it probably smelled like mildew mostly, and then
I cannot
shit and piss.
stand that. I can't stand any of those.
Yeah, super fun. So some inmates were allowed to leave the camp early because now all of the labor age men were draft age and they were taken off to the war. So there was nobody to work the fields. Some people were let out of these camps to go do labor. And a couple people were actually allowed to go back to the University of Washington, but it was a lot of you had to jump through so much red tape. But there was only 3 people were allowed to go back to University of Washington because there was a lot of students from University of Washington that were in this internment camp. But for the most, their fate was to be transferred to the Minidoka concentration camp located in south central Idaho, just outside of Twin Falls. And that began in August of 1942. And here they joined other prisoners from Alaska and Oregon. It was at least a little bit better. They actually built a community there because they were stuck there until 1945.
Wow.
And so there was a couple elementary schools, there was a high school, they had a community center, a newspaper, churches, they would even have dances. And so they were trying to make things better. There was a lot of mess halls. Life. Yeah, I mean, what they could. Mm-hmm. People were even trying to make beautiful gardens. They were trying to decorate just to make things more tolerable there. There was even a couple fire stations, but still you're in a 20 by 20 room with 8 to 9 person families.
I was just thinking, looking around this room, I would assume we're looking about almost
this room
20
that we're in
from this corner.
Imagine 8 or 9 people. You have cots.
I don't even want my husband and I and our children in the same space.
Right. Rich and I threw around the idea one year. We got this wild hair up our ass that we were going to. It was after he lost his job with an EMAC bank and he was doing day trading. And I was really starting to get into selling my handmade stuff online. I was like, I'll sell my stuff, handmade stuff at craft shows, and you'll trade online, and we'll move into an RV and travel the country. Mm-hmm. And then every RV show we went to, the RV would get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so it was like a $200,000 RV with 2 bedrooms. And I was like, it's getting crazy. And then we realized that we could never live in that small space together full time.
I know it's still my dream, and I often think about that. I think I'd still need. Here's what I've decided is the perfect scenario for me. I want that. I want a trailer, and I don't want it to be the RV to be the hugest, right? I want to be able to go down any road in America. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to go up and down
bigger than 30 feet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then when I get home, what I want is basically a shop, a pad where I can park this thing, hook it up so I can still live in it, right? But in the shop, I want to have a laundry room and probably a nice kitchen hangout area for when you host things.
Well, and you should have an extra bedroom in there too.
Yeah.
For guests.
Something like that so that when we're home, there's more space and maybe some entertaining. But for the most part, I don't want to be home.
Okay.
I want to travel around in my RV.
I'll do some traveling with you too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to go to Montana.
I know. We need to do a road trip.
Right out of the
We'll
gate.
We'll haul my trailer.
Yes. Oh my God, the two of us. Yes. We
My
could
little
totally
trailer.
do
Yep,
this
we're doing
all
it.
over.
Well, we're going to start camping in the spring. So
Yes.
anyway, so back to the terribleness.
I digress.
Yes. And the thing is even with all of this indignity still heaped upon the Japanese Americans, a lot of them were still loyal to the United States. So,
I think that's the type of people they are,
Yeah.
though.
So the Japanese American community had one of the highest World War II service records of any ethnic group in the nation. Approximately 1,000 people from concentration camps, or just from that one concentration camp, Minidoka, yeah, enlisted in the military. And again, of those servicemen that died, there was like 70 something that died, and the families couldn't go to their funerals.
So what you're telling me is that there was not only no evidence that we needed to fear our Japanese American citizens, but we actually could trust them more than others.
We needed them.
They were more loyal and dedicated than others. Yet we put them in these internment camps out of fear.
So in January of 1945, the government started shutting down the camps. A lot of them had started to be relocated out of the camps earlier. So they were trying to ease people out of it.
So we're talking about 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. But a lot of people were reluctant to leave because a good portion of these people were first generation Japanese that were older, and they lost everything. So they had nothing to go back to. They had nowhere to live, no way to make a living. And at least in the camp, they had a roof over their head and 3 meals. And so that was security to them. So a lot of people did not want to leave. They didn't know what they're going to do. So it took the government really starting to like incentivize and then cajole and then force people out. So they started closing down mess halls and schools and barracks, and then started like just literally kicking people out. And they had a relations sector set up to try to help people relocate, but it was tough. You know, they're not giving them the financial means to go and start a life again.
We've taken everything away from you. Now get out there and rebuild. What's your problem?
And the people that did leave and move back to the West Coast were met with terrible hostility and hate. I saw flyers that were put up all over Seattle and other parts of the West Coast that were horribly anti-Japanese, saying don't let them back. The governor and the mayor of Washington and the mayor of Seattle at first were like, no, we're not going to let them back. People founded really racist anti-Japanese organizations and were trying to keep the Japanese from coming back to the West Coast.
No rebuilding.
There were fire bombings, shootings, beatings, and word of this got back to the people in the camp. So then they're like, well,
no, I really don't want to leave.
Right, exactly. And then even just the like logistics of getting from the camp back to the West Coast were really difficult. So the inmates had to make their own travel arrangements.
Oh, insanity.
Buses and trains were regularly scheduled because the wartime effort would take over. You know, if soldiers needed to be moved, then a regularly scheduled train would not be available to the general public.
So really, America took away their lives, took everything they worked for, and then basically said, okay, now go do it again. No resources.
Good luck. Yeah, I heard one thing where they were given $25 in a train ticket.
That sounds helpful.
That's helpful. Camp Minidoka finally closed October 23rd, 1945. And those who chose to return to Seattle were having a rough time. Like we talked about, the anti-Japanese sentiment was terrible. And many of the residents that came back who had lost everything, they were staying in churches, they were staying in homes of friends, and also at the Seattle Language School, which had been established earlier in Seattle. It became a temporary lodgings for Japanese Americans trying to return to Seattle. And people whose houses hadn't been lost would come back and find they'd been vandalized, and there would be death threats and hate slurs spray painted all over the exterior.
People took over their lands for their own.
Yeah. And that was another thing, is that a lot of farmers here didn't want the Japanese to come back because the Japanese had kind of dominated the farming industry here. And so they were like, well, no, they're going to take our jobs. And so they formed leagues of anti-Japanese sentiment.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I mean, it was pretty bad. Even though the Japanese American community in Seattle had to face this, they overcame it eventually. And it's actually now a pretty big community in Seattle. There's about 53,000 Japanese Americans living in Seattle.
In Seattle
today.
alone.
Yeah. And part of the thing that helped too is in 1965, that Immigration Act was finally overturned. Took kind of a while. So there was no more racial exclusions from entry into the United States temporarily.
I was going to say. And then fast forward.
It wasn't until 1888. Now I've got it backwards the other way. Until 1988 that the United States government apologized for this.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting.
40 years later.
That tells me I should have known in high school that
Right.
this had happened.
Yep, exactly.
But I was paying no attention.
So,
But it probably was not taught though in
No.
our books because our textbooks were.
It was probably one paragraph.
Right.
And it was probably for the security of the nation, is what they probably said, right?
Absolutely.
So now there's a pretty vibrant Japanese community in Seattle and Washington at whole. And there has been set up these sister city relationships because Seattle actually and Washington State have a pretty close relationship with Japan. A good portion of it is just because of the trade, right? We still get a lot of trade from Japan into Washington ports, into Seattle and Tacoma, because those are the two biggest ports on the northwest coast of the United States. So we have 39 sister city relationships, which I think is fun.
In Washington?
In Washington.
Wow.
And I remember when I was 13, and this is kind of where my interest in Japan stems from. When I was 13, there's a organization called Hada Labo, and is it Hada Labo? No, that is the cosmetics company. There's an organization, maybe it's just called Labo. Hada Labo makes the best face wash. Okay. And we had a Japanese exchange student when I was 13, Nami.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I think it was Nami Takayama. And we had the best time with her. And the cool thing about kids is even with the language barrier, we still managed to have fun together.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we had the best time with her. She brought so many gifts. And I still have some of those today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's where I became interested in Japan.
Have you gone to her town?
I haven't. I have a letter from her and I have thought I should try to track her down, but all I have is an address of where her family lived when she was young. But there's a good chance her parents still live there.
Absolutely. What was her town? And
I think
and
she
was
maybe
Enumclaw?
lived in-
Is that where you were
Yeah,
at the
but-
time as a sister city?
I don't know what if Enumclaw has a sister city.
Yeah.
I think she may have been from Osaka or Kobe. I can't remember. But Seattle is sister cities with Kobe, which is the home of Kobe beef, which is that very
I keep
delicious,
thinking about that. Yes.
delicious beef.
Every time you say it.
Tacoma is Fukuoka, which is a seaside town in southwestern Japan. And that's where I'm trying to tell my brother he needs to move to because that's where all the ladies are. Bellevue is Osaka. And Vancouver, Washington is sister cities with Kyoto, which I was like, Vancouver is not like, I don't know. I wouldn't imagine you give it Kyoto.
Tukwila, where I grew up, had a sister city. And every year it was a big deal. We did celebrations. So I've known about these sister cities
that's
forever.
awesome.
But never, my parents did not have exchange students.
Okay.
Nor would
I think it's
even
a great
think about it.
experience. If you've got kids and can participate in that, do it, man.
We had a family
so enriching.
Who did it every single time, any country.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, but not. We did not do that.
Another thing, if you come to the Pacific Northwest, there's several large, beautiful Japanese gardens sprinkled throughout the Pacific Northwest. Seattle has, I think, 2 pretty big Japanese gardens. There's one not far from where I used to live in Capitol Hill. There's the Kubota Gardens. And interestingly, so the Kubota Gardens is because of the Fuji Kubota family that owns, the sinking ship parking garage in Pioneer Square. It's like
Yes.
that weird. That has been owned by the Fuji Kubota family since I think the 1800s.
Oh, wow.
They owned the Seattle Hotel and they managed to keep all this stuff even through being interred. And I think they still own that parking garage.
Oh, wow.
And it's funny because the current owner of it's just been passed down to family members. She's like, it's the ugliest building in Seattle. But it was
Very well known.
It was named the coolest parking garage in the Pacific Northwest.
Interesting.
And then Portland has a pretty big Japanese garden that's really beautiful. There's a pretty good Japantown in the International District of Seattle. There's the Uwajimaya grocery store, which is my favorite market of all times.
Forgot about that.
Which is a Japanese grocery store. It's massive. And
Port Townsend has a tree. That was a gift from somebody in Japan.
oh, nice.
So maybe we got to go there as a rabbit hole. I love Port Townsend.
I do too. Oh yeah, I'll go there with you anytime.
Hey, they have a hotel there. So maybe we need to stay there. And
Yes.
then I can show you the Japanese tree.
100%. Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. But yeah, that is kind of the history. It's a dark history. I hope that we can embrace our Japanese American citizens today and maybe feel a little regret.
Or at least some compassion and reference for what they've gone through. Because maybe, you and I won't hang out with people who were interred.
No, everybody's dead.
Right.
Pretty much.
Or it's their grandparents. And but that still that impacts for generations to come.
Absolutely.
So maybe they weren't actually in the internment camp. They are experiencing to this day the results of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And hopefully we can take this as a lesson that an entire cultural group is not responsible for the atrocities of a government.
Right. And nor are we.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We are not responsible for it, and they are not responsible for it.
No.
But that doesn't mean we can't acknowledge it and respect the results of it.
Yep. Anyway, thanks for letting me talk about Japan again.
I'm so glad we were able to give you the platform to talk about your love for Japan, the great time you had on your trip, the time you spent with your brother, the amazing sights, and so how it is related to the Pacific Northwest.
Yes. And we're going to go eat ramen right now.
I am so excited.
I know.
I'm looking forward to this.
My mouth has been watering. I know. Just thinking about it. I ate ramen at the same place 3 times in Japan. There's this ramen chain, I think called Hakata Furiko or something like that. And we found this place in Ueno, right outside of Ueno Station. And it's this tiny little hole in the wall place. And you walk in and there's a machine that you can order on. And that's nice because it has an English menu, and you put your money in, you get your ticket, and then you give your ticket to the guy, and there's just a counter, and everybody's super serious in there. They are sitting there and they are down low, slurping their noodles up. And here's the thing: in Japan, it is 100% okay to slurp your noodles. Okay. So all you hear is nobody's talking.
It's the expectation.
Oh, yeah. There's nothing to drink except for water. You have a pitcher of water, right? And you get to choose the firmness of your noodles. There's you get these little flags
that makes sense.
Tell them what firmness of noodles you want. And you can get up to 2 noodle refills.
What?
So if you get through your noodles and you still have a lot of broth and you're like, I got to keep going, you put your little flag out again and you say, I think it was kadema, futsu, which is the medium. Futsu, or is it futsu? And they bring you another thing of noodles and literally you slide it into your broth.
First time in all the talking about Japan that you've done with me or on this show that I've thought, oh God, I got to go to Japan.
You got to go to Japan. And in fact,
for my noodle refill at the firmness I'd prefer.
Yes.
Because that's part of the problem here is I'm like, okay, those were mushy. Those were stringy.
So, and what I learned too in going to this place 3 times, you order your first ones medium because it sits in the broth a little bit and cooks. But then the second time you want to order them soft because they're too hard when they just get served to you and then you slide them in your broth and they don't have a chance to sit and absorb. So a little bit softer the second time is what I went for. But if anybody wants advice or help on planning a trip to Japan, it would honestly be my absolute pleasure because then I can talk about Japan some more. So if you want tips, tricks, I think I have come up with the perfect first-time itinerary for somebody that will get you all the hits but avoid the crowds and make your life easier. Please reach out to me. You can email me at shay@rainydayrabbitholes.com.
SHEA, Shay.
Thank you. Or Jody.
JODY.
At rainydayrabbitholes.com. Yeah, and I'll post pictures on our Instagram, which is Rainy Day Rabbit Holes Pod on Instagram. And then our website is still under construction. We'll get it up at some point in the next couple of months.
Yep, before I think by January.
We'll have it. It'll be looking good. And then subscribe. Please leave a 5-star review for us. Please
and share with everyone. We're gonna get this on more platforms by January as well.
Yeah,
and also thank you for supporting us as we learn this craft. This was literally a camping with beer idea, and we've decided to dive in, and it's just been a lot of fun. But we are definitely building this plane while flying it, and thank you for sticking with us through that.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And we need your help for this to continue. And it just feels good to know that you guys are listening and like it.
And that we're making you laugh every once in a while.
Hopefully. I know we do delve into some not funny topics like the internment of Japanese Americans and American citizens.
Yeah.
But hopefully our little stupid banter helps with that.
I always say that. We're so dumb. I love it.
I know. I love it too. So thank you
We're
guys.
so stupid. I love it.
I know. And it gives Jody and I an excuse to get together just about every week.
And chat.
Yeah.
We literally chat for an hour or two every week.
I know.
For
It's
fun.
Amazing. I love it. All right. Well, we love you guys. And I love you, Jody.
Thank you. Love you too, Shay.
I love this. All right.
Yep, me too.
Well,
Sweaty
bye,
balls.
everyone. Sweaty balls. Testicles. I'm leaving that in.
Testicles.
You're here for the genitalia talk, right?
That's a Pacific Northwest thing, right?
Yes, everybody in the Pacific Northwest have genitals of some sort.
Very specific.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much, and
See you down the rabbit hole.
Okay. All right. I'm glad the wine's starting to kick in.
Yes. Lubricated. Lubricated testicles.
I'm keeping that. That's going at the end.